Hey, 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 I guess I'm live now. This is very, very interesting to me. Um, Make sure can you guys hear me and everything. I'm just gonna actually put my headphones on real quick and I'll get started here. Um, so I am going to be discussing tonight the Primordial Wedding. So I'm getting started. I will cut this into a podcast. So yeah, I am going to be cutting this into a podcast. So I'm just making sure you guys can hear me. If anybody is watching right now, then I'd welcome your comments and questions. And if there's anybody, I'll take them. But yeah, I'll be cutting this into a podcast probably tomorrow and uploading it tomorrow as well. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Nathaniel Masters. So I'm just graduated college and everything. And while I was there, I kind of got a passion for church history and the church fathers a little bit. And I didn't really study them at college. I didn't have time, but I did find a lot interesting in them. But it was something I was drawn to because of church history. And so now it's got the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going back to actually read them. And it's been very, very interesting. So yeah, that's definitely okay. Okay. Hopefully that helps. I'm working on my sound too for anybody watching. Might be the only one. Okay, I'm gonna. You gotta turn that all the way down, otherwise it picks up on my microphone. So let me. I'm gonna do some more testing. Getting my volume set up right here. So yeah, I think this is gonna be a fun night. So I think I got my sound all together, and we're gonna get going here. Okay. I got everything kind of figured out, eyeballing it. I can see everything through here. I was just kind of listening and whatnot through my headphones for discussion. So, let me do the introduction. We'll get going. So I have the introduction here available. So for my podcast, but if you're watching, obviously, you guys have heard me talking for the past couple minutes. So welcome back to the Athanasian Forum Podcast. It's just another episode. I think these are going to be our third episode, and I'm just really thankful for everybody that's tuning in. I'm Nathaniel Masters. I was just mentioning I'm a college grad. I studied biblical studies in college, and while I was there, I picked up a love for church history and really pushed me to start looking into the church fathers. The church fathers are people that, they're considered saints by some churches, but they're people that expounded on the faith. They some might say helped develop the faith. I don't prefer to use the term develop the faith so much. I would say that what they did was when heresies arose, they defended the faith from wrong beliefs. So what they did is, so in defense of that, they would explain the faith better, make it more known. But that's why I just kind of really love and care about them, and it's very interesting. I've read through, let's see, I've read through Clement. I read the letter to Diognetus. I've read Ignatius. I just finished Justin's first apology. Very fantastic reads, and it just, phenomenal. I love Justin. I mean, he's speaking almost in some sense to things we have problems today. He's opening up and he's talking. He's writing to the emperor, technically speaking, not fully probably, but he is to some degree writing to the emperor, and he's saying, well, don't judge Christians based on find out how they live their life and judge them not based on the fact that they say they're Christians, because they were being persecuted. It was like, oh, you're a Christian, so basically got put in jail or tortured or executed a lot of times. That wasn't all across the board. It wasn't all empire wide. It was more in different pockets, different cities. But it was very interesting to see that. So yeah, so Justin's writing about 150 to 165 AD, about 100. So about really about I guess it'd be 100 and 20, 30 years after Jesus. That's probably actually wrong. I'm thinking 120 years is probably about right. 140, something like that. I'm guesstimating. I can't do math off the top of my head. What do you think of me? Not a math genius. But yeah, and so he's writing during a time where, Christians are persecuted in different places, but not empire wide at all. Although what we do see is later on, around 250, you have, I believe it's the Decian persecution, and it was the Emperor Decius, I believe. He basically was empire wide, fully empire wide persecution, and it was extreme torture. You read some of the lives of the saints now. There's a possibility they've been expanded, made sound worse, and everything, their struggles. And that's always a possibility, but that's not necessarily fully true of everybody. So that may not be full of all accounts, but it's just very interesting. Whoops, kind of adjusting myself, get comfortable here. But it's very interesting to hear. It's very interesting to hear these different saints' lives. Like, oh my gosh, these guys were tortured, trying to get them to deconvert, and that didn't work. They would finally kill them, and sometimes in horrible and gruesome ways. And like I said, some people think they're exaggerated, and that's a possibility. I don't even think some Christians, especially those that really like to use the saints, have an issue so much with saying they're even embellishable, because I think they see the lives of the saints when they read about different saints and celebrate their feast days and everything. It's not so much about how accurate it is so much. It's about the story they tell and the example they give to Christians to live, to endure. Sometimes, especially in the martyrs, it's really about enduring great torture and great punishment. But for others, they expound certain ways because they're trying to teach certain lessons through these stories, because they help us to learn what it means to be a Christian. And so the purpose of those lives isn't to be necessarily accurate per se, but they're about helping us to have spiritual heroes. Really, is what it kind of seems to me to be about. And I think that's a good thing, because we don't have spiritual heroes. Well, we do, but they're usually people that are alive, and that's my problem, is we tend to look to people that are alive, and whatnot. So I should get off this subject and get to our main topic. I said I wanted to discuss in this podcast and this evening. For those listening and tuning in later, I'm recording this on a Tuesday evening, just because I'm doing a live stream, and so if you're listening to this on Spotify or any other place, I have this on a couple different platforms, and it's in the works of trying to get on Apple, but that usually takes a while, especially with COVID and everything. So it takes a little longer, but I am recording this and streaming it to YouTube currently, so you can always view it there. And if you're not, you're viewing it on Spotify or someplace else, well, I really appreciate it. But tonight we're going to talk about the Primordial Wedding. And the reason I want to talk about this is my title for it, but it comes from Matthew 22. It's the parable of the marriage feast. And the reason I want to talk about it is because of this wedding it's referring to. It is a parable of the kingdom of heaven, but it's referring to an actual wedding in some sense. And it's foundational, fundamental, and primary to the life of the Christian, and really fundamental to Christianity in general. Now, the text, like I said, comes from Matthew 22, and so that's where we're going to head to next. So, just checking back in here at the live stream. I have to jump back between tabs. It's probably not the best idea. I want to get through the text here. It's from Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. And it says, "And Jesus answered and spoke to them again by parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son, and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. Again, he sent out other servants, saying, Tell those who are invited, See, I prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. But they made light of it and went their own ways, one to his farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious, and he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So if those servants went out into the highways and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. I lost my train of thought. So the servants went out into the highways and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guest, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?" And the man was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen." All right, I want to head to a quick break for our audio listeners, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back from our break. I know the live streamers are there. Anybody paying attention on live stream, it seems a little weird, but I'm doing the cut there. I don't have all the fancy technology and stuff to make this look all professional and good. Hopefully that comes with time as I learn and grow this podcast. So, but we're back from our break. Welcome back. So we were just kind of going over Matthew 22, 1 through 14, the wedding, the parable of the wedding feast. So I want to recap a little. It says, we see a king, he's issuing an invitation to his subjects, but they refused. They refused. They're not interested. And so what the king did is he sent them out again, and again they refused. But this time some other things happened. So some refused because they basically they went to their farm or their business or whatever. And basically what this is saying is that some refused because they thought other things more important than attending the wedding of the king's son. They put other things more important than what they thought was important. They put what they thought was important first: their own business, their own lives, their own livelihoods first. But and so they thought other things more important than attending this wedding. But then we have another group. There's another group of people that responded to this, and it wasn't that they didn't esteem the king's business. It was that they hated the king's son, and they hated the authority of the king and the king's son as well, because they knew that if the son would inherit the kingdom and he would inherit the authority of the father, and they wouldn't get any, and they wanted the authority for themselves. They thought themselves to be the authority, so they didn't want the son to inherit because of that. So they killed these servants since they were emissaries of the king, and they were represented his authority throughout the kingdom. And so that was what happened. And when the king heard all this, he grew angry. And so what he did was he destroyed all those who rejected his authority in the kingdom. He destroyed those who either put their own businesses, their farms, their businesses, their families, anything first. And that which is really sad, because they just didn't want to. They had their own things first. But he was mad because, especially because those who killed his own emissaries, it's very, so it's like he's obviously, mad, and they were basically destroyed and rejected. The king destroys those who rejected his authority in his own kingdom. So what the king does instead for this wedding, he says he tells the servants to go out and bring everybody they could find to the wedding. And these were going to be because basically the intended and honored guests were proven to be dishonorable. They weren't worthy, is what the scripture says. And they brought all they could find. Now, these servants brought all they could find. But yet, when the king looked out and saw them all, he saw one man who wasn't even dressed for the wedding. He didn't come prepared for the wedding. And so the king chastised the man, and he didn't even have an answer. And his servants, he had the servants bind the man, cast him out. They threw him out. He didn't prepare. He accepted this invitation from the king that he'd answer the king's summon like he was supposed to, but he didn't prepare himself for the celebration, for the wedding, for the feast. So what is all this relating? I've kind of expounded a little bit on it just in general, but this is a parable, and what the parables do is they talk about the kingdom of heaven. And it says, so the comparisons are probably rather obvious here. You have that the king is God the Father, and the Son in this parable is Jesus our Lord, and those who were intended to be honored guests were the sons of Israel, the Jews. And so what we see here is the servants are those with the invitations. They are the prophets and the apostles. They're Jesus Christ, and even John, is John the Baptist, and Jesus Christ himself. according to John Chrysostom, he points that out. It's not even just the prophets or the apostles. It's actually John the Baptist and even Jesus Christ himself who are the invitations. But those who accept the invitation, those are the Gentiles, and they become Christians, and Christians in general are those who accept the invitation. But the man who does not dress for the wedding and they are those who say they're Christians, but they've done nothing to prepare for the return of Christ. They've done nothing to prepare themselves before Christ. And that's a key element. Is preparation is a key element for, the first group outright rejects Christ and rejects the Son in the wedding, and so they get destroyed and killed for their rejection. But then the second group, they're the people that accepted him, but there are some among this group that they may have accepted the invitation, but they ultimately didn't prepare properly for the wedding, and so they're not welcome if they're not prepared. So what we see is these different types of people. They're those who reject the invitation, and those who accept. Those are two broad categories. The first group is the first part of parable, and those are outright destroyed. These are the people who have rejected the first summons. Now, among these who reject the invitation here are those who do not think the king's business is an important throne. They ignore the invitation, thinking if they have the time, they'll go. But it wasn't that important to them. It was below their own interest. They were too caught up in the worldly lives to pay attention to the one who has dominion over all. And these people never really will answer this summons of the king, because they're always going to put their own interests, their own lives, their own beliefs, ideas first. But we also have, but then there's also those who reject the invitation because they hate the authority of the king, and these also hate the Son, for he steals away their own authority. And these are really the types of people, like the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. They were the people in power, and that's what we see in this parable. Is right before this is the Pharisees started catching on to what Jesus was doing. He was in the temple and he was preaching, and he was speaking in parables, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, they caught on to what he was doing. They was like, he's talking about us. And of course they didn't like that, and so that's why they thought they were losing their own authority. They did not like that Jesus was usurping what they did not like that how they saw Jesus was usurping their own authority. But really, their authority was from God, and so it was never theirs in the first place. It was always God, and God the Father gives his authority to Jesus the Son. All authority has been given to me on heaven and earth, is what Jesus says. So they care. What it really is these types of people that reject the invitation because they hate the word. What they end up doing is they killed the prophets, and they killed those who prophesied Jesus. They killed John the Baptist, and they ultimately killed Jesus. And so in the manner of their forefathers who rejected the prophets, they too reject Jesus, and John the Baptist, prepare the way. And so what happens we see is God destroys them. They're ruined and their authority is no more. They're condemned and put to death. And this is, in my opinion, seen in the destruction of the second temple, of Solomon. And it's like, well, they haven't offered sacrifices in, close to 2,000 years. And they've tried. Trust me, there's some in Israel today that are trying to be able to. They're trying to be able to. How do I put it? They're trying to be able to offer sacrifices, but it's just not working. It really isn't. I mean, too many complications, and there's too much opposition. I think too many people have a cow, especially the Muslims there. But anyway, I think that's a sign of the fact that the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Jews rejecting Jesus, that was the consequences. The second temple was destroyed. It went on for a little bit, but the time for the temple was over, ultimately with the death and resurrection of Christ. And while it continued for a little bit, there is a little bit of overlap. Eventually, that chance is going to end, and the king will put them to death. He will, destroy those who rejected his first invitation. But you also have those who, and then you have those who accepted the summons. These are two kind of major groupings. But there's, like I said, even within these, there's two subgroupings. But the second group of people, the main second group are those who accept the invitation. Now, so what it is the servants who were sent out after the destruction of the intended guests are the apostles. They go out to the whole world and bring whoever they find to the wedding feast. They bring the new invitation to whoever will hear it. Yet some who answer this new invitation come to the wedding unprepared for a wedding. They're not dressed in the proper garments. These the king has bound up and tossed out. The people who come unprepared are those who think God will forgive them for not preparing. However, these people already knew there was a wedding. I mean, it wasn't a secret. It really wasn't a secret that, there was going to be a wedding. The king had already sent out invitations everywhere. So these people that just weren't invited the first time, it's like, oh, they probably knew there was a wedding. I mean, it's the king. You're not going to miss the king's invitation. Everybody's probably going to be talking about it. Not everybody's going to be invited, but everybody's probably going to be talking about it. It's like, I mean, we'll just look at the wedding of like Will and Kate over in Britain, or I'm brain farting on Harry and I can't think of her name, but you know who I'm talking about. Those roles. I mean, everybody knows about it, but there wasn't very many people obviously invited to those. But what we see is, so these people, that they're the second invitation. They already knew there was a wedding. And so there's people that came on prayer that didn't dress for this wedding, but they already knew about it. So there's not really any excuse. These people are, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a secret. So too, God has made his plain intentions, has made plain his intentions to all. He's shown the world his plans. And so those who do not come ready on short notice are not really excused from being prepared because they already knew there was a wedding. You would think that when the news goes out, oh, there's a royal wedding, and you think there's a chance that you're going to be invited, maybe. Just maybe there's a chance you might be invited. You would think that people would prepare. Oh, I'm going to get all my nice clothes ready just in case I do end up getting invited. And we see, there's most people prepare, but there's some that never expected to be invited in the first place, apparently, or something, or they just knew about it. They didn't want to be invited or whatever. They just didn't prepare when they heard about the wedding. And so these people are thrown out. They're tossed out because they do not prepare. And really this idea is even expounded upon by the Apostle Paul, for he teaches the Romans, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. They are without excuse. Those what's been made revealed. The creation of the world itself is revelatory. And this is what this means. We come to knowledge of God. We come to knowledge of only through what God has revealed to us. We can only know what is revealed to us. Knowledge is not found outside the human mind. We cannot really know anything in some sense except by the revelation God. Without God's revelation, we can't understand anything. And that revelation is really the entirety of, and here's the thing, revelation isn't just, oh, he sent the prophets, he sent Jesus and John and the apostles. It's more than that, Paul proclaims the entirety of creation reveals and speaks to the glory of God, the entire creation. And that's the idea. So the revelation, because revelation is the same in some sense as creation. You can make a distinction, I think, that's somewhat made by later scholars, but there's no excuse for us, because even creation itself points to God. I mean, look at like the fine tuning. If you're familiar with the fine tuning argument for God, it's miraculous how many different factors that have to be just right. The small and weak nuclear forces and just all, and it's just crazy. I can't remember all off the top of my head, but it's like it's miraculous how everything seems to point to a creator. I remember listening to J. Warner Wallace give a talk on the fine tuning argument for a creator, a God, and so what he said, he quoted one, and he said quoted like some kind of I guess it'd be some kind of somebody that studies this stuff. I don't know. Somebody that's actually like an astrophysicist or something like that. He said, well, the universe certainly looks as if it was designed. I mean, and I know that another guy they talked about, Wallace mentions, is I think it's like Anthony Flew, who was a biologist, and he basically was an atheist until they started coming out with started studying DNA, and it was like the revelation of DNA and the double helix and all that stuff. And he came out and he's like, okay, I believe that he became a theist. He didn't become a Christian, but became a theist, understanding something. So creation itself points to God. So revelation itself is part of creation. It's not separate from. So there's really no excuse for us not to know who God is, not to know whether there's, there are those who deny our ability to know. They'll say, well, we don't know if there's truth. We can't be certain whether there's an objective truth and objective reality outside ourselves. We can't really know if there's truth or not, is what they say. So what they're doing is they've deceived themselves into believing there's nothing beyond the material world, what we can see, in some sense, and so they might have some kind of feigned belief in quote unquote science, but really it's just a feigned belief. Is really all it is. It's those who deny our ability to know whether there's truth or reality outside our own minds. They have deceived themselves into believing there's nothing beyond the material world. Yet creation, again, and this is where I think we need to be careful, is I disagree with those who say there's the natural and the supernatural. No, all creation is natural. God is natural. There's no supernatural. There's nothing beyond the natural. It's the seen and the unseen, the visible and the invisible, the created and the uncreated. God being uncreated, we being the created. God being, and the angels being invisible, but we being visible. Seen and unseen. That's what this is talking about. It's not natural versus supernatural. Everything is natural because everything is designed. All created things are designed a certain way, and that's all natural. Even angels are designed a certain way. And this is my whole thing is not all creation can be seen with the naked eye, because we know about angels. They're tests to, and then we know about demons and spirits, but they're unseen. They're still created, but they're unseen. So not all creation is invisible. It's not visible to the naked eye. So not all of creation can even be known through the naked eye, but through God alone are all things made clear. Yet by the living word of God, all things are made manifest to us who know him. In the incarnation, all things become clear to us, in my opinion. Well, I'm not the only person that says this, but so this idea of preparation is so crucial to our understanding of this, because the second group of people, because what we have here is people that have prepared and those who are unprepared for the thing. And so those who come unprepared to the wedding, they already knew about it. They've already seen other people destroyed because they refused summons. And so they accepted it, but they didn't prepare themselves. And so it's like, well, and they get thrown out, and it's like, well, why are we going to be mad that we're thrown out? Well, it's pointless, because even all creation, the very fabric of everything we do, has already been revealed to us. It is only by God himself, his own revelation, that we can know anything. Whether you call that natural or supernatural, I disagree. Again, I disagree with those terms. I believe everything is natural. God is natural. You can't even really use that term. But like everything that's created is natural. Even the angels are natural, but we don't see them. And so I think it's a misnomer to talk about them in that way. But I want to move on. So we talked about those who did not prepare. But what about those who did prepare? There are those who accepted his invitation and prepared to come to the wedding. These are the Gentiles who were not the first among. They're not the first to be asked, but they were the ones that were given. Granted, they were given the invitation second, and they became Christians. And all those who become Christians, whether Jews or Gentiles, because there were Jews. The apostles were Jews, and they spoke first to the Jews. And those Jews who did come joined the church. They're still part of it. But because the Jews, a lot of Jews did reject it, it was opened up to others, namely the Gentiles, those who were not Jews. And so that's very important to understand. Now, these people, what they end up doing is having a feast, and there's merrymaking, and they celebrate the union of God's Son to his bride, Jesus Christ to his bride. And it's very interesting. I was reading John Chrysostom on this. He has homilies, which are sermons for people who aren't familiar with the term homily. His 69th homily on the Gospel of Matthew is over this parable, and man, it was really good. I just loved it. But his third point was kind of talking about some of this. And I mean, I had this big long section. I don't think I want to quote it all, but he basically in this, he's talking about, why are we preparing ourselves a place on this earth? Because soldiers, he compares us basically to soldiers, Christians as soldiers. And it's like, well, soldiers can't, we have to build, a soldier doesn't have his own home. He's on the march. He can't take time to build his own house. And so he's basically talking about how in temporal terms, soldiers here on earth really don't have time to build their own houses. They don't have time to, build up and store up a lot of stuff. They're always, fighting on the move. Particularly in ancient times where they actually moved by foot basically, or horse. But, and so he's basically comparing this. Well, what are the soldiers of the Lord? They build, he talks about the ascetics, basically those who go out into the desert. They build themselves little huts and hovels. And he says, these are where the people that are prepared for the wedding. They build themselves not here on earth, but in heaven, they're building a house. Is what he talks about. And so, these are the beauty. And he gives, I was just reading this and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like this. And he talks about this picture. It was almost like a picture of heaven in my mind of what heaven was going to be like. Let me find it. He says here, for if we were to go away into the wilderness and look at the tents of Christ's soldiers, we shall see not canvas stretched, neither points of spears nor golden garments making a royal pavilion, but like as if any one upon earth, much larger than this earth, yea, infinite, has stretched out many heavens. Strange and awful would be the sight he showed. Even so may one see here. For nothing are their lodging places in a condition inferior to the heavens. For the angels lodge with them, and the Lord of the angels. For if they came to Abraham, a man having a wife, and bringing up children because they saw him hospitable, when they find much more abundant in virtue, in a man delivered from the body, in the flesh disregarding the flesh, much more do they tarry there, and celebrate the choral feast that becomes them. For there is moreover a table among them pure from all covetousness, and full of self-denial. No streams of blood are among them, nor cutting up of flesh, nor heaviness of head, nor dainty cooking. Neither are there unpleasant smells of meat among them, nor disagreeable smoke, neither runnings and tumults, and disturbances and wearisome clamors, but bread and water, the latter from a pure fountain, the former from honest labor. But if any time they should be minded to feast more sumptuously, their sumptuousness consists of fruit, and greater is the pleasure there than at royal tables. There is no fear there. And here's a section I want to talk about. There is no fear there or trembling. No ruler accuses, nor wife provokes, no child cast into sadness. No disorderly mirth dissipates, no multitude of flatterers puffs up, but the table is an angel's table free from all such turmoil. And for a couch they have grass only beneath them, like as Christ did when making a dinner in the wilderness. And many of them do this, not being even under shelter, but for a roof they have heaven, and the moon instead of the light of a candle, not wanting oil, nor one to attend to it. On them alone does it shine worthily from on high. I mean, that was a small quote. I quoted half of what I had there, and that was probably more than I should have. I should have trimmed it down a little, but it was this phenomenal picture of what it really was. And he started, it's like, there's not going to be any clamor. There's going to be noise. It's going to be this peace and harmony. And it's in my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a picture of heaven. Really a picture of heaven. It was crazy. John Chrysostom. I mean, and there's a reason why he got the name Chrysostom. I believe it means golden mouth. He really was a phenomenal preacher. He was known for his preaching. And in fact, he was living an ascetical life, I believe. And they basically forced him to leave the ascetical life from being a monk to become the patriarch, the leader of the Church of Constantinople, who's basically within the empire at the time would have been considered the second greatest bishop in the empire after the Bishop of Rome. Because at the time, the Bishop of Rome, he had the idea of primacy, which is very different from the supremacy the Pope later has around 800 that starts developing because of Frankish influence, and then later gets into a lot more stuff, and then there's a Reformation, and we know how that story ends when it comes to the Pope. But the point is, John Chrysostom was famous, and he writes. In fact, I would really struggle if you ever are trying to, if if you want to read any of his stuff, I think he's got homilies on just tons of the Bible. I know tons of the New Testament. I had the Gospel of Matthew was one. He had like 80 something sermons on that, maybe. It's just crazy. This was sermon 69, a homily 69. But so I've kind of broken down what all this means. I've talked about this primordial wedding. I've kind of broken down this parable, but I think there's another section. I want to get into the primordial wedding part. I want to talk about what the wedding itself is. So I want to take a break, and we're going to wrap this up soon, but I'm going to talk about this because there's some important points I want to bring up here and some food for thought about what this means, this primordial wedding, because the parable itself isn't talking about this stuff, but it's pointing to this wedding. So we're going to take a quick break for our listeners who are on Spotify and there's other platforms, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. I know my YouTube streamers, that's going to seem a little weird, but again, I'm doing it for recording purposes. It's nice to have a little bit of a break. What you do allows for commercials or anything like that, which I'm probably going to start trying to do a little bit of if I can, just see what happens there. But anyway, we're back. So I want to talk about this primordial wedding. We have to prepare. I want to get into the inferences of what this is because there's a lot to unpack. But talk about this wedding. Well, we never mentioned who the bride is. It's never mentioned. So we have to prepare for the wedding and understand who the bride is. This is what I'm calling this third sermon, is the importance of the preparation and understanding who the bride is. Now, I think the scriptures and the fathers are quite clear on this, that the bride in here is the church. The unmentioned bride here is the church. Paul writes about this in Ephesians chapter 5, 22 through 27. He's talking about marriage, but he compares marriage between a man and woman and the proper understanding of marriage. But he says he's comparing it to Christ and the church as a husband and wife. He writes, "This mystery is profound, and I am saying it refers to Christ and the church." He's very clearly, when he talks about marriage there, he's referring to it as how Christ and the church interact, and that's the example for how our regular marriage should be, the pattern after our regular human marriage should be. And again, he exhorts the Corinthians to remain pure in their devotion to Christ, writing in his second letter, "I betrothed you to one husband to present you as a pure virgin to Christ." And that's from chapter 11, verse 2 of 2 Corinthians. So I betrothed you to one husband to present yourself as a pure virgin to Christ. He's talking to the Corinthian church there. I presented you, a pure virgin. Saint John the Apostle teaches in Revelation chapter 19, 7 through 8, he says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb," that's Jesus, "has come, and his wife has made herself ready," the wife being the church. And he says, "And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints." And this is where we get to the idea of preparation. And so we see this in the fathers as well. It's Clement writing in his sermon or second letter. It's kind of interesting. That's got some debate about whether it's a sermon or a letter. Most people, I think, generally think of it as a sermon. He proclaims, "I do not suppose that you are ignorant that the living church is the body of Christ." Taken from Ephesians 1, 22 through 23. And he continues, says, "For the scripture says, God made man male and female. The male is Christ. The female is the church." Now, these are important, this idea right here, the implication is that the church is the bride of Christ. The church is the bride. It's just so important. So there's this wedding happening. What do we know about what a marriage is about? It's about a man and a woman becoming one flesh, becoming united. And so that's important, but there's preparation that takes place. A bride, proper weddings, you're preparing yourself for a wedding. You prepare not just for the wedding, but for the marriage itself. A virgin, when it says a pure virgin to Christ, present you as a pure virgin to Christ, it's saying, prepare yourself, make yourself pure, preparing yourself to be pure. And that's what John, teaches as well. It was granted to her to be, it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright. She was prepared. And they say, what does he say that this fine linen is? It says the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. St. James teaches us that faith without works is dead. You can have all the faith in the world, but faith alone does not save you. It is faith with works. But here's the issue. It's not that the works in and of themselves save you. It's because the works have to be the right types of works. These works that, quote unquote, save us. Now, this is dangerous territory. I know a lot of you probably disagree with me, but the works that save us are not the works in and of themselves. It's what they're based upon. They're based upon that faith. You can do different things. I can go to church. I can pray. I can do all those things. But if it's not based on the faith and belief I have in Christ, it is not a good work. Only good works draw, and it's not even in the works themselves that really save us. It's that the works don't really save us. It's the faith that saves us. But here's the thing. It's that we demonstrate our faith by works. That's what James teaches. He that our faith is demonstrated in our works, and there are works of the fruit we bear. And Jesus teaches that we should know prophets by their fruits. We should know the good from the bad from the fruit they bear. Is it good fruit or bad fruit? And the works of true faith are good fruit. So we shouldn't deny that. And I need to be careful. I've probably gone a little too far in what I was saying. I should have thought this out a little bit more, but I do believe in. Now I'm kind of recanting. Sorry. I'm trying to think through how I want to say this. Faith without works is dead. We must have works because our works prove our faith. But the works in and of themselves don't save us in as much as they draw us closer to God. Any work that draws us closer to God is drawing us closer to is an act of faith because we trust God. So it's important. Is the righteous acts of the faith, acts or works. I got into the whole faith's works debate, and I should have kept my mouth shut. Foot and mouth syndrome, right? But no, that's an important thing. We have to act as saints. We have to prepare ourselves, and that's what works are. That's what acts are. That John's referring to. We have to prepare ourselves for the wedding. We have to do the righteous acts, and the righteous acts are built and based on our faith. And if we don't have faith, we don't produce good works, at least not good ones. And in Clement, going in here again, he says, "Oh, I've already covered that." Sorry, but this is an important thing. Is this preparation, the element of preparation, has to do with what we're doing to prepare ourselves for the wedding, for the marriage of Christ and His church, which in some senses already happened, and it happens every Sunday. In my opinion, well, I want to be careful. I'm not going to go that far. I want to say that the marriage of the church is already here, yet it is yet to be fully consummated. Because I think we know Christ is coming again, and that's what John probably I believe is referring to. Now, okay, so let's move on. I want to get on, and this is my last little section here. I probably screwed up and said way too much in that last section, so I apologize. Speculating too much, which is not good. You should never you don't want to speculate too much. My goal, and I think any good theologian's goal, and anyone that loves the church and loves the faith, is always to expound what's already been said. It's to defend what's already believed, what has always been believed. So I probably speculate too much, and I apologize for that. But I do believe works are important to salvation. Moving on, I want to talk about I title this the Primordial Wedding, and the reason I call it that is because the fathers tell us that this has been ordained from the beginning. God has planned this wedding from the beginning. He always had His people. He had Adam and Eve, and they rejected Him. He had the patriarchs Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then he had the Jewish people. Through the law of Moses, they were united in that. The 12 tribes, and then you had Judah, and I can't remember. There's another tribe or two with Judah, and it became, and then so the Jews continued on that until Jesus' day, and then they rejected Him, and now it's the church, the marriage, this primordial wedding. It's because it's from the beginning. It's fundamental. It's the basic in some sense. Clement teaches again in his sermon. It says the Bible, which is really referencing the Old Testament here. Moreover, in the apostles, which is the New Testament, say that the church is not limited to the present, but existed from the beginning. For it was spiritual, as was our Jesus, and was made manifest in the last days to save us. And there's another great thought, this idea, it has been ordained from the, it's been pre-planned. And I really believe that God's pre-planned everything. That doesn't mean that we don't have free will or anything like that. We do. Because frankly, I believe in the God that's powerful enough to accomplish his plans and his purposes despite our human freedom, without dictating our wants and our desires either. So, it's one of those things where people want to try to develop too big of a system. But this is an important point. This is what it's pointing to. Is this wedding has been planned from all times, primordial. It's what we are saved by, because and I call it primordial. And I say this is important because it's foundational and upon the building blocks of this, which is built, because in the incarnation, we through the humanity of Jesus, we are saved. Through the perfection of his human nature, we enjoy salvation and the redemption of all human nature. And so when we become one flesh, the church is one flesh with Jesus, we too are becoming redeemed through that. But we have to prepare ourselves, and we have to prepare ourselves for the consummation, really, the end of days. I feel like I really butchered this ending here, and I apologize for that. But I want to kind of close on with this thought, because I think this is an important thought, and this is really what I'm trying to point out to. John writes in his gospel about what Jesus teaching, about Jesus teaching, and what Jesus says in the Gospel of John is that we must be born again. Well, how can we be born again? Well, there's a lot of interesting ideas, and one comparison that's made is baptism is to be born again, and different things like that. I like to think of it as this, because there's a quote from Cyprian, Saint Cyprian, I believe of Carthage, and he wrote, "No one can have God for his father who does not have the church for his mother." And so I think this is what I'm bringing up to, is the church is the bride of Christ. She is our mother. And that's an important thought. If we don't have the mother. So for me, to be born again means to re-enter the womb. And to re-enter the womb, this is not a physical act, but I mean, it is, there's physical parts to it, but it's a spiritual womb. And so this spiritual womb is part of the church. The church is our mother. She nourishes us. And so I think that's really important thing. If we don't have the church as a mother, we don't grow. We can't live as Christians. And so the church is the source of life. She's the one that gives us life. And there's life in the church. And that's an important concept, I think, about this wedding. This is what I'm trying to point to. This parable is it points to this wedding feast, and it's pointing, but it doesn't talk about. It may not talk about the bride, but that's what it's pointing to, is the bride, and this is the church. And so, what do we understand? Well, the church is married to Christ, who the bridegroom. Then, and the church is the bride. Well, then they produce children, right? And the children it produces are the individuals, and we become part of the body through our marriage with Christ. So if we were to be born again, we must re-enter the womb, which is part of the church, the spiritual womb of the church. We must be nourished by it. We must be formed by it. And when we are, and then we can be born again in the next life. And that's what I think is very important, is that being born again isn't so much in this life. It's about the next life, being born again into the next life. I think sometimes we think too much of this physical world as we got to be reborn again. It's all a spiritual concept in this world. But I think when Jesus returns, there's going to be, well, I don't know. I don't want to speculate anymore. I've already done enough of that tonight and butchered saying a bunch of different things. So I'll be careful there. But that's the idea I want to leave you with, is if in this parable, it talks about those who reject this invitation, this wedding, they're going to be destroyed. And those who do accept the invitation, they don't prepare, they're going to be cast out. And so the idea is we need to prepare ourselves. We know that the wedding is coming. We know the consummation of the wedding and the marriage is coming. So if we have to prepare ourselves, and if we're to prepare ourselves, we need to go to our mother that nourishes us and feeds us as a babe does. And so I think that's important. We need the church to form us. Now, you don't have to, that can be a local church primarily, because we need to have strong connections to our local church. Those are the people that are going to most form us and help us and grow. And we're all growing together. I mean, there's no magic or anything like that. So that's quite an important thing to do. And that's what I want to leave you with. If we're to prepare ourselves for the wedding that is to come, well, I don't even want to say the wedding, the marriage feast. If we want to prepare ourselves for the consummation of the marriage, which is coming, we need to prepare ourselves. What does it mean to prepare ourselves? It means we need to re-enter the womb of the church, who is our mother. As Cyprian says, we must have the church for our mother. If we have God as our father, we must have the church as our mother. And so I think that's an important point. We need to go to the church to be nourished. We need to go to the source of life. And this what does this church offer? What does our mother offer as a source of life? It has baptism and chrismation and the Eucharist. The Lord's Supper is what some might be more familiar with. We need those things. They're sources of life. They're the instituted means of grace. So that's what it is about. It's about receiving God's grace. Because salvation isn't about, let me think how to put this. To be saved, it's about recognizing our own depravity. It's about recognizing our ownness. God doesn't ask us to be perfect. Well, he does. Let me put it. To be saved, one doesn't need to be perfect at the outset, but one needs to be striving for the perfection of God. We don't need to be perfect to get into the church, but we do need to be striving after God. We need to be striving to be perfect as our Father is perfect, as Jesus teaches, and that's what it's about. And so in the church is where we find that perfection. It's where our corruptible nature, human nature, is found incorruptible by becoming one with the flesh of Christ. Through his humanity, we are saved because his divine nature has made his human incorruptible incorruptible. It's through Jesus we are saved, and because we are part of the church, we are married to Christ in that sense, and that's really important. And so there's life in the church. That is the message, and that is the end goal of the primordial wedding, is that there's life when we go to our mother, when we prepare ourselves for the consummation. It's all really weird terms, and I've probably done a butcher this, so I want to hop off here. I want to thank you guys for listening and listening to my ramblings a lot too. I'm so sorry. I need to probably do some better jobs preparing. And said this is all kind of new to me. I'm still learning how this goes, and I hope you guys will give me grace for anybody that is listening. And you guys will be able to help. If you have any suggested feedbacks, I would love to hear it. In fact, let me give you an email address. I have an email address I want you guys to send me. If you guys have any comments or concerns, you can go to the contact me page on the Athanasian on Athanasian Forum.com. There is a contact page, and you can send me an email that way. I believe it's going to be contact@AthanasianForum.com. That should forward to an inbox. But if that doesn't work, you can always email me at nathaniel.masters.21@gmail.com. You can always email me there. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. As I want to work to improve this, I need to make sure I'm putting more preparation time in this probably. I'll probably put 3 or 4 hours at least into this. I need to probably put 10. So there's an element of that. And so if you have any comments, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. And hope in the future you'll grow with me. You'll stick around and help me grow and become better at this. So I'm going to end the stream. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, be at peace in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.